Ask Abby, providing answers, insights, and education designed to give you the tools and knowledge you need to thrive financially and live confidently in retirement.
Here with Abby Reed on Ask Abby, your resource, ladies and gentlemen, for information about your investments, your financial and your retirement planning. Abby Reed is, of course, with the retirement family at Reed Financial Group. And Abby, you've got this report about the 3 biggest expenses in retirement and how to plan to control them. Very helpful in identifying several of the big expenses that we will face into and throughout retirement. So appreciate the report, appreciate the time. Why is it that we need to plan so carefully and specifically to address these 3 expenses?
These expenses are going to make the biggest difference in people's retirement plans. So they're the ones that either aren't necessarily thought about as much, and also the ones that have the biggest impact. So we have taxes, which are throughout our entire lifetime are going to be one of our biggest expenses. Healthcare, which obviously gets more and more expensive as we get older. So that's a huge planning issue for retirees. And then inflation, which isn't necessarily looked at as an expense, but it is, and it makes everything much, much more expensive. It's one of the biggest impacts on the success or the failure of a retirement plan, because everything's going to get more and more expensive. And if your income sources in retirement and your assets aren't continuing to increase as well, then you're going to be in trouble in the future. And so that's one of the ones that we really want to educate on the most is inflation, the effects of that, and how to combat that, especially in times, like this year and last year, where inflation is much, much higher than it has been in the past decade or so.
And in order to avoid expenses potentially and catastrophically surpassing our assets, we've got to formulate a very specific plan. You talk about the need for income planning. How is it that these 3 big expenses are so different in retirement versus our working career?
The importance of an income plan in retirement is paramount really to everything else. So a lot of times what we see is in the accumulation phase of life, it's really just about saving more, maybe getting better returns or returns that are a match for your risk tolerance, a little bit of tax planning, those sort of things. And then there's kind of a switch that flips when you go from accumulation to the preservation and distribution phase of life. And that's, all right, how do I start getting that money out of these places that I've saved it in, the IRAs and those sort of things? And it's a completely different, it's just completely different. The rules are different. The way you invest needs to be different. There's just a whole different set of rules essentially for retirement. And the income plan is a lot of times the missing piece for people because maybe they've accumulated what they want to accumulate. But where are you going to take income from? You're not getting income from your job or your business anymore. So what's the best way to start pulling income from these different sources? And then also the peace of mind that comes to our clients, and we see it happen when there's a written income plan, when we know, how are your basic expenses going to be met? How are you going to pay for the travel that you want to have for, the first 10 years or so in retirement when you really want to get out there and travel? How are these expenses actually going to be met when they have an actual plan that they can hold in their hands and refer back to? Maybe if they start getting a little nervous about pulling the trigger and retiring, that plan is huge for peace of mind, and then also for the planning aspect. So it's different when you have an employer or when you have a business. Your income is consistent. It's going to be coming out every month or bi-weekly. The taxes are already taken out. Most likely you're getting pretty regular raises. So that takes care of the inflation piece. They might even pay a portion of your healthcare. So it's like all of those major concerns and major risks in retirement are really taken care of already in the accumulation phase. And so now it's, how do we deal with all of those things on our own now that work is optional for us?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the thing that struck me, is that these have been a factor all along the way: taxes, healthcare expenses, and inflation. But the responsibility shifts onto our own shoulders, because our employer probably deducted taxes, may have offered a healthcare plan for most Americans, and inflation. They are forced to help us keep up with that in order to remain competitive in the job market. So when we retire, those responsibilities shift onto our own shoulders. And it seems like, Abby, over the course of retirement, 20 to 30 years or more, a lot of unknowns can happen with each of these three largest expenses. The report is "and how to plan to control them," kind of after identifying what these three big expenses are. So there are strategies to help us more predictably understand and control these three large expenses.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest risks in retirement, the first one is identifying them so that each person knows, okay, this is what I'm up against, and then partnering with a professional that can help match the correct strategies to you to combat these types of risks. So there certainly are ways to deal with taxes in retirement, to combat inflation, to make sure that you've planned for healthcare expenses. And then on top of just regular healthcare, long-term care. That's something that we see all the time. And I completely understand why people really don't like to think about that. They almost kind of put that out of sight, out of mind. And that's the last piece of the puzzle that often people want to plan for, because it is such a large unknown. It's not fun to talk about. It's not fun to think about. But there are strategies that if you put them in place proactively, they can really save your retirement, and look out for your spouse. If you're married and one of you needs long-term care, that can really put a strain on the spouse that's not in long-term care. So there are things that we can do today that your future self will thank you for. And it's just about partnering with the right professional to do that and doing it as proactively as possible. And it's never too early. It's never too late. And so that's what we encourage people to do, is reach out and let us take a look at your entire situation, see what kind of exposure you have to these three things in particular, and then talk about some solutions to solve those concerns and solve those risks.
For as confident a retirement as possible, you have to have a plan put together, and Abby Reed and the team from the retirement family at Reed Financial Group can help you structure that plan. Just reach out to them, 678-442-0255, 678-442-0255, or you can submit your questions or be in touch at goaskabby.com, goaskabby.com. Abby, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here on the program.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure too, Peter. Thanks.
Here to answer your financial questions, visit the website goaskabby.com for show resources and to submit your questions and get answers, or to schedule your complimentary financial investment and retirement planning strategy session. You can also reach out to Abby directly at 678-442-0255. That's 678-442-0255, or at goaskabby.com.
Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, LLC, BCM, a registered investment advisor. BCM and Reed Financial Group are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BCM, but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents. Third-party ratings and recognitions are no guarantee of future investment success and do not ensure that a client or prospective client will experience a higher level of performance or results. These ratings should not be construed as an endorsement of the advisor by any client, nor are they representative of any one client's evaluation.